Hello, everyone. I'm Jeff Adelman here with another questions show. And today we have a very exciting, energetic, enthusiastic guest. We have somebody who is going to talk about a subject that I have talked about with my clients and friends and potential clients. One of the most important things that you could have on your automobile insurance policy. In fact, I would say it's the most important coverage that you could have. Uninsured motorist coverage, uninsured motorist coverage. And today I'm very pleased to bring to you Andy Kasten from Creative Financial Property and Casualty Group. Andy, we should have done this a long time ago.
Yeah, we needed a COVID crisis, I guess, to bring us together, right? Apparently.
Yes. And
Wow.
this is my first show since the crisis where I'm actually doing it in my office. No fake backgrounds, anything like that.
Very good. Well, I am in the office as well. Of course, we were at home for quite some time, but it's good to get back into the office, you know, with some normalcy anyway.
Well, Andy, you know, we've known each other for many years, different circles, friends, networking. I know you're running for Coral Springs Commissioner right now, and that's very exciting as well. But can you tell everybody a little bit about your background in insurance?
Sure, absolutely. So I've actually been in the insurance business going on about 21 years right now. I originally started in the business at New York Life. So I was a life and health agent, financial advisor for many, many years, had my securities license, did all things, you know, pretty much aligned with that type of business. But 13 years ago, I noticed that my clients who were doing business, I did a lot of business, had a lot of business clients. They were, you know, doing property and casualty. Of course, they needed all those different kinds of coverages. I was unable to do it. And so I thought, well, you know what, if I get my license, I could ask those clients, since they're already doing financial business with me, hey, let me take a look at your property and casualty and see if I may be able to help you. And so I went back and got my, what's called my 220 license, which is a property and casualty agent. And then through the last 13 years, I've kind of focused more on that business. I just find it a lot more interesting. It's not as much pushback in that type of business as there is on the life side. Equally as important, but you know, it's the line of least resistance. So that's what I've been doing for 13 years. And I've had my own agencies. I've run agencies for hospitality companies, and currently am the president of Creative Financial Property and Casualty Group. And we pretty much practice in all areas of property and casualty. So personal lines, something we're going to be talking about today, as well as commercial lines as well.
So basically, if somebody gets their property insurance from you for their home, but you also offer automobile insurance as well.
Yeah, yes. And we try to do as much as we can for that client. As we say, we don't like to leave too many crumbs on the table. If you only have one person to work with that you can rely on to handle all of your insurance coverages, makes it easy to make one phone call and get things done. And so that's kind of our recipe, though we don't always, you know, grab everything, and that's fine. And we try to help wherever we can.
Well, I appreciate you being here for us today.
Thank
for
you,
the
Jeff.
audience, because I think that there's a lot of agents out there that really don't talk about this as much as they should. And when they come into my office, I tell them, well, you don't have uninsured motorist coverage. You better pray the person that hit you has some liability coverage, or you're in a bad way.
Yeah.
Can you explain uninsured motorist coverage for the audience?
I sure can, and I agree with you. Well, as you said before, I think it's one of the most important coverages. So Jeff, listen, I don't know everything. I don't remember everything, but this book was the book that I used to study to get my 220. So I'm just going to read you the definition so we don't get it wrong, at least what the state says uninsured motorist is, but we'll get into it in more depth, obviously. So here's what they say, that uninsured motorist is a form of coverage to pay compensatory damages for bodily injuries under one's own policy for amounts which otherwise would have been recovered from the liability insurance of another, either an uninsured motorist who carries liability limits that are lower than the insured's damages are, or we also call it underinsured motorist. right? Because in Florida, as you know, all you need is 10, 20 limits, and we can talk about what that means, but you need relatively very low limits to put your car on the street. And we also know that, you know, a lot of times injuries that occur in automobile accidents are way higher than just $10,000, including your own PIP coverage, which we can talk about, of $10,000. But what we find also, Jeff, is, and I did a little research about this, Florida is the #1 state that has uninsured motorists driving their cars on the road. 27.5%, somewhere in that neighborhood, of people that drive don't have any insurance at all.
And they're legally driving that way. The state actually allows you to drive with just PIP coverage and property damage coverage, not even liability coverage if you injure another person. That's right. I mean, it's crazy, but
mind-boggling. Yeah. And so, you know, Florida has a lot of issues with that. And so that's why, you know, uninsured motorist is very important to have.
I like to tell my clients, the insurance company steps into the shoes of the uninsured person to defend the case.
Correct.
So it's not like they just hand you a check.
Right.
You would treat it as if the person had insurance. And I think that's the easiest analogy that I've heard and stole from somebody else.
Right, that's true. You can literally use your insurance, if you have uninsured motorist, I guess you'd say, to supplant the insurance that the other person either doesn't have or has very little of, right?
Absolutely.
So it's critically important. But, you know, it's not inexpensive, and therein lies the rub, in that, you know, it's a significant piece of the premium in the policy, and a lot of people forego it for a lot of reasons that they are confused about and/or that they don't understand. And if I'm the agent and I'm selling you automobile insurance and I'm not really dialed in on making sure you're covered properly, but that I just want to make the sale, I may tell you, you don't need it, you know, because you're going to save $500, and it makes the sale easier for me. And I'd rather not write the business if, you know, if somebody doesn't want it. And I rarely will, though there are some cases where I will take it, but I make people sign a lot of disclosures that they've been explained and that I recommended it and that they just decline the coverage.
And you certainly don't get that kind of service when you do it online and just check the different boxes like Geico and some of the other providers do.
That's correct. And so, you know, and I have my own personal story that we can talk about later on if you want to, how I found out it was so important. And just because
if you could share that with us.
Yeah, I could. Well, so, and just because I'm an insurance agent, you know, doesn't mean that I may be covered properly. I mean, it's like the mechanic's car that's broken down all the time. He's fixing everybody else's cars, but his car is broken down because he just maybe doesn't have the time, or he's, you know, doing other things. But how I found out about this, I always had this coverage. I always knew that it was important before I became an agent and even afterwards, especially being in Florida and knowing that, you know, a lot of people drive around with no insurance or very little insurance. But even those that have sufficient insurance coverage, let's say the typical coverage, you know, for somebody that says they're fully covered is 100, 300 limits, right? $100,000 of liability per accident per person, or 300,000 maximum coverage, you know, in any one given accident. My daughter was in a very serious car accident, and it was one of those New Year's Eve drunk driver crashes that, you know, you've seen on TV and that you dread as a parent to have. Now, her injuries, to make a long story short, she's okay today, thank God, but she missed almost a whole year of college. Her medical bills were about $1 million when everything was said and done. And so even though the other driver had 100, 300 limits, my daughter's, you know, bodily injury was so severe that we were actually able to use our insurance, okay, to get another $100,000 of uninsured motorist from my policy. And so that was important because even though we had health insurance, we had a $10,000 deductible at that time, right? So I didn't understand that, the PIP insurance, which I thought would cover, the deductible of $10,000, it was paid out, but of course it was paid out as first party insurance, right? So that's the first thing to pay, and then they coordinate the rest of it with, with the health insurance. So I actually still had to pay my $10,000 deductible. Where would that money have come from if I had no uninsured motorist and the driver of the vehicle had no insurance, right? I would have had to cover the $10,000 myself. So in this case, I was able to use that money that we recovered from their policy to pay the deductible. But in addition, we had more costs because that wasn't, those weren't the only costs. There was lots of other costs that weren't covered, rehabilitation and just, a whole laundry list of other things. And so we were able to use our uninsured motorist, which really helped a lot. So like this is just, and my daughter was young. She was 19 at the time. So she relied upon us for her, economic welfare. But what if that happened to you or to me and we're not able to work, right? So we would, in an uninsured motorist situation where we don't have that insurance, kind of be SOL, as they say, right? Like we would have to somehow come up with the money and hope that, either the other party had enough insurance or in many cases, they just don't have enough. So, that's kind of how like we found out about how it all works. And then I'm sure you can explain, and this is going to blow people's mind when I tell them that, so you do have health insurance, but I don't know that people understand that in the event that you are in an automobile accident and your health insurance pays out claims, they are entitled to get reimbursed for the amount of money that they paid out in the event that you do get a settlement, right? Or you do get money from insurance. Now, that's unbelievable. You can explain more why. I don't understand the law myself. In fact, I didn't even know that was the case. And so we ended up paying back quite a bit of money to the two insurance companies that we had for health insurance. After that, we still had money left over from the underinsured and uninsured motorists. But had we not had that, I will tell you that it would have been very difficult. It would have been a real bad situation. So that kind of blew my mind that even existed in Florida. But there's all sorts of compelling reasons to have this coverage other than, people say, well, I have health insurance. What do I need it for? Well, there's a lot of other reasons.
Well, I mean, the bottom line is what you're talking about is the right of subrogation. And a lot of people don't realize this. If you have health insurance and you make a personal injury claim, the health insurance companies, a lot of times, especially if it's in a ERISA plan, can be entitled to 100% back of what they pay out. Now, when they bill $1,000 for a service, sometimes it's $100.
Right,
or
correct.
Maybe I'm being generous, but the bottom line is what they pay out. There's a lien on the case, and that's something that would need to be addressed. Now, we always try to negotiate that as part of my representation of a client, but it varies as to how much you can actually get it reduced.
Right.
And the reason you asked me about the reason.
Yeah.
What is for it is the idea is they don't want somebody to double dip. They're getting paid for their car accident, so they don't want them to get paid twice for the medical and have a windfall. That's the idea. But the truth of the matter is, when you have an accident as severe as your daughter's, $200,000 isn't enough.
No. Yeah.
Okay. I mean, quite frankly, if there was an umbrella policy involved here, I am sure that would have been in play based on the accident you're talking about.
That's correct. That's correct. And Jeff, I'm sorry to interrupt you, but and I didn't, just so the people know, I mean, I didn't know Jeff at the time that this accident happened. We did have other representation, but the attorney at the time said to me, wait a minute, you're an insurance agent and you don't have an umbrella? And I was embarrassed to say that I didn't. So what you're saying is true. I would have been able to tap my umbrella as well. However, I didn't have one at the time. So yeah, I do sell umbrellas. I do recommend it for people. I will tell you, a lot of people, the majority of people do not buy one. They're not that expensive for what they offer. But again, live and learn, right?
Well, I'll tell you, and for those of you out there who think we're talking about, well, it's not too, doesn't look like it's going to rain today. We're not talking about actual umbrellas, but that would be a great promo item for you.
Yeah.
If you, but can you explain what we're talking about when we talk about an umbrella?
Well, sure. So the umbrella is, think of it like an umbrella, right? An umbrella sits above your head, right, to protect you from the rain. So the umbrella basically will sit above your other policies, typically your homeowner's policy and your automobile policy. You may have a boat that you insure. It could sit above your boat policy. And it sits there waiting. Rarely do they pay. I don't see them paying very often, you know, but they do pay after the underlying insurance, which is your homeowners or your auto, pays out the maximum under their policy. So again, if you know, in this case, if with 100, 300 limits on my uninsured motorist, you know, once it paid out the maximum, I could have then gone to my umbrella company had I had one and had them step into the shoes of the other driver that had the underinsurance, and they would have paid. There are some limits that you must have in order for most umbrellas to sit above. You know, typically they want 250, 500 limits on
Right.
automobile coverage and minimum of 300,000 on your homeowner's policy. But they also protect your assets and so forth, that if you were on the other side of this equation and your insurance company paid out the max because of something that you were at fault about, that doesn't limit anybody from coming after you personally to pay those additional costs, right? And therefore your umbrella would then step in and, you know, negotiate on your behalf, you know, in that particular lawsuit to protect you against, you know, them coming after you personally. So there's a lot of compelling reasons to have an umbrella as well, especially for people that have money. It's really important.
You brought up a really important matter that we didn't address before. If you're listening to this, what if somebody comes to you and says, yeah, I'm going to have the bare minimum of I'm going to have $10,000 of BI,
right?
But I want to take out $300,000 of UM. Can you do that?
No.
That was kind of a softball, Andy.
Yeah, no. And you know, it's funny because people say, oh, I know. What we'll do is we'll write the low limits and then we'll get the umbrella to sit on top because the umbrella is cheap. Well, listen, as I always say, Jeff, the insurance companies, they're pretty smart, right? I call them the legitimate bookies. They make the odds. They know that, listen, the lower the limits you have on your underlying coverage, the more possibility that they're going to have to step in and pay a claim when those lower limits are expended, right? So that's why they require certain limits in order for them to sit on top of the other limits. But it protects you personally. And, you know, it is important because there's a lot of leverage in buying $1 million of umbrella coverage for, let's say, $500 annual premium, you know, in terms of the protection it gives you. So,
but whatever coverage you get for liability coverage, you're allowed to purchase the exact same amount for uninsured motorists.
That's correct.
And
yes.
That's because you should be able to purchase the same for yourself as you would if you injure somebody else.
Correct. And then, Jeff, we may want to talk about stacking.
That was the next place I was going.
I was thinking ahead of you.
Now, this is something that people know even less about.
Right.
I'm always preaching about stacking.
Yeah.
And I'll let you explain what stacking is.
Basically, it's pretty simple. If you have, let's assume you got two vehicles and you have 100, 300 on each of your vehicles, and you have that same scenario of an accident and you included stacking in your policy, you're actually able to tap the limits of your limits on your other vehicle. So in this case, instead of 100,000, you would have 200,000 available. Now, I will tell you that does increase the premium significantly, and I think that's the main reason why most people decline stacking. By the way, it has to be offered legally. It has to be offered to you, and you have to sign a declination letter every time you purchase, you know, automobile insurance, as well as uninsured. Yeah, uninsured motorist as well. Correct. So, but the stacking is really important. But again, Jeff, I will tell you that most people, they just don't buy it because it is significantly more expensive. you know, and generally speaking, auto insurance in Florida is probably higher than most other states, you know, in the country. Maybe because we have such low limits to put a car on the road, and we have a lot of lawsuits and drivers that don't have insurance, et cetera, et cetera.
A lot of states don't have personal injury protection coverage, though.
Yeah.
There's kind of a trend going that way.
Huh.
And with PIP, no fault, a lot of people don't realize this, but even if you have health insurance, your $10,000 of auto coverage, the PIP, pays the first $10,000
Correct.
of
Yeah.
medical care if you're involved in an accident, even if you have
Right.
health insurance.
Right. And in my case, Jeff, and again, I should have known, but I didn't. When the insurance company, who was Geico at the time, was my carrier, they paid $10,000 for the medical bills directly to the hospital. I was thinking, oh, great, they just fulfilled my $10,000 deductible. No, that's not the case. They paid first. Now Andy's policy pays second, which means now he has to pay his deductible, and then, you know, the insurance company will pay the balance based on the policy that I had. Thank God I had very good insurance at the time. But, you know, the bills were, you know, once I had my $10,000 paid, I actually had a 100% plan. So my plan paid 100% of everything thereafter. But then we made a switch to another health insurance company through group plan. And then we had another deductible we had to pay. So, but you know, the $10,000 of PIP will get used up. If you are injured and you go to the hospital, I don't know, if you're in the hospital for one day, you're going to have bills well over $10,000. Let's face it. So
Sometimes an hour.
yeah, well, emergency room, whoops, you know. So so it's really important. It's hard to talk to people about it because they can't conceptualize ever needing it until that time that they have the accident that they need it.
Well, Andy,
And then it's too late.
I appreciate you sharing your personal story with us. I feel would be remiss if I didn't share this situation I had with a client.
Great.
I represented a man who was involved in an accident. He had 100,000, 300,000 bodily injury coverage, but no UM. Thankfully, the person that hit him had decent coverage. I think it was a $100,000 policy, and we settled his case for like 10 grand. But when I had the conversation with him about coverage, I said, how could you have $100,000 and not have a penny of UM? How could you do that? You need to change it. He called that week. I gave him his settlement check 6 months later.
Mm-hmm.
A week after that, him and his wife were in a catastrophic accident where somebody ran a red light, and his wife was taken by helicopter to North Broward. Person had a $10,000 policy.
Ooh.
Now, it may not sound like a lot, but we were able to do this. He had taken the 100,000 and he got stacking. So I was able to get her $200,000 of coverage above the 10,000 that she never would have had. And it made a big difference in their lives.
Yeah.
Because can you imagine not getting any compensation for something like that? I mean, I'm talking about plates and screws and all of that. And it happens every day in Florida because people see the cost of the premium and they don't realize the most important thing you can insure is yourself.
Right. And again, I always tell people, you can't go to, I always use Allstate as although they don't even write property insurance, but they have other carriers that don't write their own paper. But you can't go to Allstate when your house is on fire and buy insurance. So you got to buy it when you don't need it, you don't want it, and you got to buy the proper amount so that it's sitting there. God forbid you don't need it. That's great. You're just paying your premium and you're moving on your merry way. But if you do need it, you want to make sure that it's, sufficient enough to, to put you back to where you need to be, so that you don't end up not being able to work, and not having money that will supplant your income that you're missing while you're away from work. So it's really important. It's a hard discussion to have, and I don't oftentimes convince people to take it. It just is a nature of the Florida market, and I think it's generally speaking throughout the country. But I know when people come to you, If it's not in place, it's too late. And then you have to give them the hard reality of, hey, listen, man, these people only had 10, 20. And, unfortunately, that's all you're going to get.
It's a tough conversation, but unfortunately, I have it several times a month with people who they get hit by somebody who has no insurance or does illegally, or they're legally driving with just the bare minimum, and then they don't have uninsured motorist coverage, or they have a
Right.
$10,000 and
Right.
it's always a hard conversation. But
Yep.
I tell them the only way to stop. I would not drive on Florida's roads without it. It's a scary place. Um, Let me ask you this. I mean, obviously, in light of the pandemic, have you seen at all people, or do you think people will start maybe using one car or using less cars as a result of using platforms like Zoom to work and not needing two cars? Maybe
Yeah,
maybe that would allow them to put more coverage on the car.
I mean, I suppose so, but I think because even though we're sheltered in place, as they say, and people are using their vehicles less and less, you can't hardly, in Florida, generally speaking, you're not going to be able to walk to where you need to go to. And so I think that, we drive almost everywhere that we have to go. If you lived in New York City, you'd probably walk 20 city blocks, which is, maybe a mile, but you wouldn't do it in Florida, So, plus there's other forms of transportation, obviously, that you can garner. So I don't know that, but there is a cost savings if you're not going back and forth to work. So if you report you're using your car strictly for pleasure, let's assume that you decide, hey, you know what? I can work at home. I don't need to go back and forth to the office. Call your insurance company and tell them, listen, I'm no longer going back and forth to the office. I'm using my car for pleasure. The premium should go down, because they do rate you based on, are you using the car for business, or are you going back and forth to work, and how many miles is that? No, I just use the car for pleasure. Be careful you don't lie, because that's not a good thing. But if it's legitimate, you probably could get some savings on your current insurance, providing that you're not using it to go back and
I
forth to
never
work
even
anymore.
thought of that. That's really good advice.
Yeah, and but as far as people giving up a car, I don't see it in Florida because everybody seems to have a car. You got a kid, now the kid's got a car. Of course, then we're talking about a huge amount of money, so that's a whole other maybe show that you want to do on that. Because
how to insure your below 25-year-old child.
Buy a car, give them the cash and let them buy the car in their name. And then you have to and unfortunately, then you may have to buy some lower limits. But, Jeff, just so you know, in practice, we will not write any policy less than 5,100 limits. That's just our agency practice. We don't want to write lower limits. We won't write lower limits. If somebody wants that, God bless you. I go out there and call one of the carriers and just do it direct. I don't want to have that on my conscience that somebody is underinsured. And I just feel that, 5,100 is the minimum that we will just consider, even though that may not really be enough at times. Anything less than that, I think you should really reconsider increasing your limits.
You're a good man, Andy Kasten.
Try to be.
Yeah, and I'm glad that you're back in your office. I'm also glad you're back on the ice rink. I know that's very important to you. Yeah,
it is.
One of these days I'll join you. It's been
trying to find my age with the running around the ice with a bunch of young guys.
Well, if you could, can you let everybody know how they can get in touch with you?
Yeah, sure. So, a best way to contact me is you can call my cell phone, and I'm available pretty much. Well, I say 24/7. All my clients have my cell number. If it's a weekend or after hours, I'll pick up the phone. So my phone number is 954-854-4314. That is the best way to get me. Or my email is my name, Andy, the letter K, at cfcasualty.com. And either way, we can connect. And I'm glad to help, even if it's just a consult to help you with what you have. I'd like to give back, and I like to help people. And the business, it'll always come your way. I'm a sales guy, but I'm not looking for the sale all the time. I'm looking to help first, and then earn your trust, and then hopefully you'll do business with me.
Well, I really appreciate it, and I think this is a very important topic, and I can't thank you enough. When am asked to give speeches and all that, this is usually one of the things I focus on because it's something that everybody can do right now. And in fact, there's a chapter in my book, Choosing the Right Lawyer is No Accident, specifically on uninsured motorist coverage. And if anybody would like a copy of that, you can get it on my website or call me, 954-341-2777, and I'll mail you a copy if you're interested.
And I do have, you did give me one, and I do appreciate that. And it's an easy read, but it's got, you know, it's got all the guts of everything you need to understand, you know, in layman's terms, not legalese, you know. It's hard for me to read some of the insurance policies that I sell, let alone trying to figure out what it says. And I have to turn it over to an attorney to say, hey, what does this mean? Because they just said that it included this, but then they took it away over here. And that's, you know, that's the typical boilerplate of insurance policies.
That's the spiel I give most of my clients. So it was very easy to put that down. And everything, I try not to talk with like a lawyer when I'm with my clients. So, because I don't think anybody likes, I don't even think lawyers like that, but you know, it happens. It happens.
Well, it's like going to a doctor and they talk medical speak. You know, just tell me in layman's terms what I need to know, right, Jeff?
Exactly. Andy Kasten, thanks so much for your time. Thank you to all of you who are watching, listening. If you have any questions, I'm Jeff Adelman. You can email me at jeff@adelmanlawyers.com. If you have any subjects you would like to speak about or hear about, feel free to contact me anytime. I appreciate you following us, and have a great week, everyone.
Thank you, Jeff. Really appreciate it.